spiritual journey is all about removing. You are already what you're supposed to be. You are already that. But something else has been added to you. Imagination has been added to you. Dreams have been added to you. The idea that you are something separate, you are different and distinct from the air you breathe, from the space you occupy, from the life that is unfolding inside you and outside you, this feeling of separateness has been added to you. You did not consciously choose it, because there's no way to pick something so mysterious that you have no control over consciously, which is basically your ego. What is the difference between human and divine? Human is our story, our delusions, our misunderstandings. Divinity is the purest form of whatever we are. We are alive. That is an element of divinity. We are conscious. That is an element of divinity. All the qualities that emanate from the depth of our being before they get polluted by the mind and get twisted and distorted, they all come from this one source which we recognize as divinity. So in a way, removing is the process. So for Mira, she was able to dance her way to enlightenment because she was dancing not to please another mind, not even herself. Pick any activity. If you are able to do it with such completion, such self-abandonment, that you are least bit bothered about how it's going to look, what you are going to get out of that action. If you're able to perform an action, keeping the ego completely aside, it does not matter what you're doing, that doing will eventually lead to non-doing, which will eventually lead to truth. It is not what she was doing that is important. She sang, she danced, she sat in meditation for hours, she cried in pain, she suffered because of her desire to meet this entity. None of her activities are important. You can replace all her activities with your own. The only difference is your actions are performed for the mind. Your actions are subservient to an idea. They are result-oriented, goal-oriented. They are very worldly, very purposeful. Hence, very cunning and manipulative. There is no purity in the doing. We do many things. But the doing does not lead to non-doing. We don't take that doing to its ultimate. What is the ultimate purpose of all this doing? A lifetime of doing, if it does not lead to a place of non-doing. If it continues to put you in that same place of more doing, then you have wasted your whole life. The objective of doing something is to understand ultimately how to get to that place of non-doing. We do things because we don't know how not to do something. We don't know how to keep quiet. We don't know how to stop the mind. We don't know how to forget the past. We don't know how to disconnect ourselves from our yesterday. Hence, we are a continuous doing that has nothing to do with the now. That has nothing to do with who you are, what you are at this very moment. It is a continuation of all the things that you could not do. Basically, you are the movement of the past through the present. That's why you are totally oblivious to the present. You are in the present, but you don't belong to it. At the most, you can acknowledge. Logically, you can say, well, of course I'm in the present. Where else can I be? But even that is an idea in your mind. Even that is a reflection that is happening in that phenomenon called the mind, which is nothing but the past. Now, what is the mind? Is the mind the present? Or is it the past? How can the mind be present? What is the objective for an entity called the mind if you are in the present? Because in the present moment, there is awareness, there is consciousness. There is no need for thoughts. There is no need for intermediary. There is another way of doing things, another way of reacting, another way of accomplishing things. We have a word for it. It's called intuition. One of the least understood words. We think intuition is something special. You have to somehow accidentally, luckily, get hold of this thing called intuition. Or if you spend enough time doing something, studying something, suddenly you become intuitive. This is not the case. Intuition is the most direct way of experiencing life. You simply know what to do and what not to do. Mira's path is the path of intuition. There's no logic, there's no reasoning, there's no structure, there's no method, but there's deep intelligence in her process. There is deep connectivity to the present. Everything that is happening, it's happening in the now for her. In fact, you can simply replace the word Krishna with now. Her longing was for now. Her thirst was for now. Every time she was dragged by the mind into the world of thoughts and ideas already established for her by those who had come before her, using their minds and the minds before that, that is what she was fighting against. She just wanted to be left alone. Because we don't know how to describe this deep detachment from the worldly things, we use it to describe another form of attachment called devotion. But true devotion, in a sense that Mira was devotional, it is not an attachment, it is a deep detachment. It's because we are obsessed with action and doing something, we look at her and say, she was on the path of devotion. She was doing this, doing that to connect with her Krishna. Actually, she wasn't doing anything. Because she was not doing anything, whatever came naturally to her. When she wanted to cry, she cried. When she wanted to sing, she sang. These are natural, intuitive outflows. Nobody has to teach you this. In fact, singing comes more naturally than speaking. Look at the creatures in existence. They don't speak, but they sing. More creatures sing than speak. In fact, none of them speak. They all sing. It's because it is something natural, something intuitive. It is possible to express yourself without words, without language, just as an emotion, just as a feeling. In every which way possible, She was simply trying to connect to the present. It's because we do not understand what this present is, what this thing called devotion is. We have turned it into something mysterious, something illogical and otherworldly. We are all devotional. Natural part of us is a devotional part. We have to use our brains, we have to use our minds, logic and reasoning as an additional wall to separate ourselves from our deep connectivity to things. We can look at Mira and say, why was she attached to a statue of Krishna? Well, because nobody detached her from that statue. Nobody added artificial, unnecessary ideas between her and her statue. She grew up naturally developing a relationship with that statue. It's the same way we develop the relationship with our bodies, with our minds, with people around us. Unless and until someone interferes and says, you should not be having this relationship, this is not the right relationship, you need to break away from this relationship, you will continue to hold on to it. Now think about your parents. You fully believe, without a single doubt in your mind, that if not for your parents, you would not have been here. What if I were to say it's the exact reverse? It is because you are here, your parents are here. It's because you are alive, you are conscious. The only problem is you are so attached to the body that you're tracing the source of your body through your parents. What if you're not the body? What if you are something that has always been there? What if you are pure consciousness, pure aliveness? Then how can you trace your birth through your parents? Then the whole story gets reversed. You have to rewrite your entire story. It has to be rewritten as an inner churning. There is a consciousness that begins to move, that begins to agitate. There is a disturbance. That disturbance becomes thoughts. Those thoughts become ideas. Those ideas become things. And eventually you wake up to a world of parents, friends, and all other things. Now, where did all this come from? It has come as an extension of your imagination. Because you don't know this, you see yourself as just the body, you say, without my parents, I could not have been here. It is true only in some sense. It is true for them. From your parents' point of view, of course, you cannot be here without them. That is why they can never see you as some ultimate truth. The last people to accept your enlightened nature will be your parents. It is the hardest for them. Why? Because for them, they have to go beyond their own illusion, their own delusions, before they can see that a body is just a figment of our imagination. My son, my daughter might be physically an extension of me, but in essence, they have always been there. Just like I have always been here. We are all part of this something higher. This something that has existed before all the manifestations of the mind. This something that exists outside of time. Anything that exists outside of time can only exist in the now. You can call her devotion madness. You can call her attachment to that statue of Krishna a form of delusion. But because it was pure, it was unadulterated, it was not mental, it was deep and existential, that became her path for self-realization. It is not the object. It is all about what that object is doing to you. What are you allowing that object of your love to do to you? Otherwise, you are anyways living in a world of shadows, in a world of dreams. If you're not attached to a statue, you're attached to something else. The madness is anyways there. Whether you want it or not, you are madly obsessed about something. It could be your own body, it could be your own thoughts, it could be your own desires. That is still an attachment, that is still a form of madness. But the difference is, her madness had a way of clearing out, because that was the only madness she was stuck with. She stayed with it long enough till that madness cleared out. The problem with you is, by the time one madness clears, you pick 10 others. You are constantly adding new delusions, new desires, new deviations. Hence, it feels like you're not mad, because you're moving away from one madness to another. The moment it becomes clear that this is just madness, the same thing continues, a desire after desire, desire after desire. But for Mira, it looks like she is mad because she's only obsessed with one thing. In fact, what you're asking is, why isn't she interested in all the things we are interested in? Why isn't she interested in getting married? Why isn't she interested in having children? In a way, you're saying, why isn't she mad like the way we are mad? Why is she mad in her own way? Because we don't want to accept our madness. We say, we're all fine. We're all normal. We have so many of us to acknowledge that we are normal because we have accepted our madness. Now, this is a deviation. It has always happened like this. When an individual begins to search for something deeply, with full intensity, people look at them as mad. Take Ramdas, for example. He was born Richard Alpert, a psychology professor in Harvard. His longing to understand the nature of the human mind, the nature of the self, became so strong that he saw everything he had done up until then as a dead end. He wanted to find someone who knew something more than him. He had dedicated his entire life for the study of the human mind. At the end of it, he concluded that I know nothing. He tried everything possible. He experimented with all kinds of drugs, hoping that it can reveal something about the nature of reality. What is this mind? Why am I attached to it? Eventually, he dropped all the drug experiments and went to India and found an enlightened master called Neem Karoli Baba. He was fondly referred to as Maharajji. Here again, there is a deep connection. He has found an individual who knows something that nobody knows. His language is different, his words are different, his ideas are different. Logically, it does not make any sense. But intuitively, there's a part of him that is telling him that here is your answer. He spends most of his time studying under him. And one day, suddenly, the master dies. Richard is totally heartbroken. Nobody is there to guide him. After so many years of searching, he found a master and now he's gone. He went into deep depression. His suffering is not very different from Mira's suffering. Mira was suffering all the while because she cannot have a meaningful human relationship with Krishna. He doesn't exist. It's an entity. It's a figment of her imagination in a way. How can she settle with Krishna? She cannot get married to him. She cannot fall in love with him in the normal sense. He does not talk to her. He does not respond to her. For her, suffering was the very path. For Ramdas, it just happened. From that deep place of suffering, in combination with that inquiry, that longing to know himself, something cracked open. As he himself says, it is unimaginable what comes out of deep suffering. If you don't try to get rid of it, if you don't try to run away from it, if you are able to watch it, if you are able to accept it, you will see suffering is the door. Why is it that people are not thirsting and longing for self-realization? Why isn't everybody jumping over each other, trying to get ahead in this race of wanting to know themselves? Because they have been tricked into believing that it is possible to go beyond suffering. It is a temporary going beyond. When it's too hard, instead of trying to understand why are you feeling hot, what is this nature of suffering? Why is my body unable to adapt to this changing temperature? We simply turn on the AC. People will look at you like, are you crazy? Why are you making a big deal of such a simple thing? Why don't you turn on the fan? All the solutions people provide us in the world are such temporary covering up solutions. I'm not happy, do this. I don't know who I am. You need to find something important to do in the world. I feel lonely, miserable, then maybe you need this, maybe you need that. It's always about just covering up suffering. When you don't cover up suffering, when you accept it, when you understand what suffering is, that becomes a way, that becomes the path. Eventually, for Ramdas, all that suffering, all that pain of not knowing who he is, missing his teacher, missing his teachings, eventually turned him inward. It became a point of illumination for him. For Mira, knowing well that there's no way she can find her Krishna on the outside, she simply turned inward. In her singing, in her dancing, in her poetry, she found him on the inside.